Hey, Gil, I just want to welcome you. We are live on the main stage. I just wrapped up with Bertrand and have introduced you. So we're excited to have you.
Great. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you and see you, and I think everyone on the main stage can as well. So I'm going to go off stage and let you take over from here.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to gridCONNEXT, and welcome and thank you for joining our panel, Scaling Clean Energy, Pathways Towards Net Zero Goals. You are all in for a treat. But before we go on with our panel, I want to introduce this just superb and excellent panelists that we have today. Let me start with Alice Jackson. I'm not going to read their entire bio. I'm sure you have their bios in the package ahead of this conference. But Alice is the president of Xcel Energy, Colorado, a company serving 1.4 million electric customers and 1.3 million natural gas customers. The company is a recognized industry leader in delivering affordable and reliable service, providing clean energy choices, and in reducing carbon and other emissions. Second is Paula Gold-Williams. She is the president and CEO of CPS Energy in San Antonio. Paula leads more than 3,100 team members with the vision she has coined, People First, whereby CPS Energy is evolving its efforts to create and deliver value to its customers, community, and employees into a new age of energy solutions. And next, our third panelist is Jill Anderson. She is the Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Southern California Edison, one of the nation's largest electric utilities. She's responsible for overseeing the company's customer products and services, business and residential customer account management, call center operations, customer information systems, replatforming, and competitive telecommunications business. Now, why are we having this panel today? Well, as you know, we really have no time to waste when dealing with the current climate crisis. And we have a new opportunity that we all must seize. We have a new administration coming in, and it is determined to help transform our energy economy to a clean economy. And so we are at the right moment in time. The stars are aligned for us to act as soon and as quickly as we can. It is also a unique opportunity for GridWise, where we advocate for investments in our grid. Our grid is the backbone and the platform to enable our transition into a clean energy economy. And the three panelists that we have today, I must say, are the leaders in making this transformation happen. They are innovative, they are creative, they are energetic, and they inspire a shared vision, and they make sure that their teams are all aligned in achieving our goals. So with that start, let me begin by asking Alice, who is the president of Xcel in Colorado, to talk a little bit about Xcel Energy from a macro perspective. Xcel is a multi-state utility, one of the first utilities that declared a net zero goals, and also on the micro level, Alice, on some specifics that you are doing in Colorado. Alice?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gil. And hopefully you can hear me pretty clearly. I hear a little bit of feedback, but hopefully that's not coming through on your side. It is great to be here with all of you today and to be able to visit about some of the things that Xcel Energy is doing. It is such a pleasure to be on the stage with Jill and Paula again. We've had a couple of opportunities separately to have visits and to be in different events, but it's great to be together on this panel. So looking forward to the conversation that we get to have today. But to start with, just to give those of you who are less familiar with Xcel Energy a little bit of an overview of the company. As Gil mentioned, we are an investor-owned utility. We are also vertically integrated, which means we have the generation, transmission, and distribution aspects of our business. We do serve in 8 states, and if you think about our service territory, we're going to go from the upper boundaries of the U.S. to the lower. We're going to start in the upper peninsula of Michigan, go through Wisconsin, over to Minnesota, North and South Dakota, down to Colorado, and then Texas and New Mexico. So quite a different range of states. You can think about that as a lot of different ranges of geography, from the mountains and the Rocky Mountains that I have the pleasure to serve here in Colorado, down to the plains and very rural areas in the Panhandle in eastern and southeastern Texas. And then you add the additional layer on top of that of the politics. So a variety of interests, perspectives, industries, customer mixes that we have to deal with on a regular basis, and have the pleasure of working and figuring out what is this cohesive message that we can move forward with as a corporation. Gil also mentioned that not only were we one of the first, but we were the first in the U.S. to announce a zero carbon initiative by 2050, with what we call as a stake in the ground and a marker in 2030 of hitting an 80% carbon reduction. That is one of the areas that we are very strongly focused on right now. And we got comfortable with making those announcements towards the end of 2018 because of the existing technologies that are available today. We strongly believe that we can reach that 80% carbon reduction across all 8 of those states, very different jurisdictions, which will come with different solutions as well. But we can reach those with the existing technology. Now, we really focused on 2 things in addition to those targets. We have 2 guardrails that we have to focus on. First off is reliability. At the crux of it, in the core of it, as utilities, we have to keep the lights on. We have to make sure we're providing those services to our customers that now more than ever we recognize as life essentials, and something that we have to make sure that we are doing a good job of delivering whenever we possibly can. And then the second guardrail that we operate within is affordability, making sure that when we deliver these services for our customers, they are not breaking the bank. The customers don't have to make the choice between heating or cooling their home, or alternatively food, medicine, or clothing for their families and their children. It's something we have to keep a focus on as we move forward through time, even while we're pursuing this low carbon future. So with that, I'll turn a little bit to Colorado and some of the exciting things that we're doing here, Gil, before I hand it back over to you so that we can start this robust conversation today. But here in Colorado, we've been strongly focusing on what is the pathway to get to that 80% carbon reduction. Through the regulatory process and the policies that have been put in place due to legislation in 2019, we actually have to present what that solution is to our Public Utilities Commission in March of 2021. So we have 3 to 4 more months before all of this, becomes, a subject of lots of discussion, scrutiny, evaluation, and the metrics. So we do have to make that filing in March, and I'm really excited to say that many of the different pieces are coming together. There's a lot of good possibilities. The technologies are there for us to be able to be successful, and we're going to have to, we'll be able to meet the targets and goals as we move forward. So looking forward to presenting that as we come into the next year, whether it's wind and solar. But the other pieces of the puzzle, Gil, that we also have to focus on are transmission. And the last thing I'll say is it's not just about our company. It's about us, but it's also about the entire utility industry. One of the beauties of what it is that we all have the opportunity to do is usually we're not in competition with each other. What we are in is we're trying to figure out how can we best deliver our products and services to our customers in a cost-effective manner. And because of that, the research that's going into the technologies that we still need to close the gap, those are really exciting because it's not just for one company, it's for the entire industry as a whole. So coming together and figuring out how do we clearly state what are the problem statements in order to close the gap on the remaining kilowatt hours that we're not remaining with carbon-free energy, that's where we get to collaborate as we move forward. And it's a really exciting time to be able to do so.
Great, Alice. A lot going on in the Xcel world. And it is very helpful that you outline your company from the upper Midwest all the way to Texas and New Mexico. It's good to just visualize it and see the various approach that you need to apply and reach your goals. We're having a little bit of video technical issues with Paula, but nevertheless, she can hear us and we are going to be able to hear her. And that smiling face is something that we're all used to anyway. So just a little bit of a difference. She's not moving, but the smiling is right there. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what it's like to lead a community or municipally owned utility. And, you know, I mentioned their logo of people first, another tagline that I have heard from Paula in the past is a flexible path. So Paula, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're scaling your transition to a clean energy grid in San Antonio? Paula? Oops, are we having also audio problems? We'll see. All right, Paula, we'll come back to you as we fix the technical issues. We're going to move on to Gil Anderson. Gil, Southern California's Edison is just such a large utility, and therefore everything that you do is at scale. In fact, I just read in the news clips maybe this morning that you approved more than 500 megawatts in storage. So everything that you do, whether it's storage, demand flexibility, EV, efficiency, are just so big in scale. And so tell us a little bit about your pathway to net zero. I know that you also, Southern California Edison was one of the very first utilities that mapped out its path towards a net zero. Jill?
Thanks, Gil. And like Alice, I'm just so happy to be here with all of you and sort of reflecting on how nice it is we can get together like this and not have to do it through airports and travel and all the ways that we were doing it pre-pandemic. So great to see everybody. You know, Southern California Edison, just a quick overview. We are one of the largest utilities, investor-owned utilities in the country. We serve Southern California, about 15 million people. We are decoupled in the way that so we're not vertically integrated the way that Alice described, and we are the supplier of the electricity and manage all of the infrastructure. But a lot of the supply that we do to customers, we purchase in the market. So our focus when we think about carbon free, and we certainly have very ambitious goals here in California, is really threefold. We start with making the grid as green as possible. And that's both from the customer side, where we have significant adoption already of distributed renewables, and then in all of those purchases like the battery storage that you just mentioned that we announced recently, that we do with other partners in the market to make sure that the grid itself is being supplied by as near carbon zero as possible. And in California, it's the law that by 2045, electricity delivered through the grid has to be carbon free. The second area, and you mentioned it too, Gil, is around electric transportation. And so at SCE, we manage the largest light duty and the largest medium and heavy duty electrification programs in the country, which we're really proud of. We've already installed thousands of chargers through these programs, and we are really focused on the benefits here, not just broadly to customers through lower air pollution and lower greenhouse gas emissions, but the opportunity to really reach underserved and disadvantaged communities in our service area who have disproportionately been impacted by air pollution caused by regular transportation. So electric vehicles is core to our pathway in reaching a carbon-free future. And then the third is building electrification, which is really moving forward in a future where we have the use of gas only in the areas where we can't electrify. So buildings themselves, homes, businesses, going to 100% electric solutions so that we can reserve the use of fuels for those parts of industry where electrification isn't currently feasible. So that's our three-pronged approach, and we've released this as our Pathway 2045. We're already making a lot of progress on it, and I thought I would mention how, you know, all of the challenges with COVID and the economic downturn, how that's impacted our progress on the pathway. Starting with vehicle electrification, we've actually been able to achieve all the goals that we've set out for 2020 at the beginning of the year when no one knew this was going to happen. We've met all of those goals now as far as commitments for customers with heavy duty electric trucks and buses, the deployment of light duty chargers. And so I would say that we are seeing continued customer commitment towards electric transportation. We're very aware that the economic challenges are continuing, and so we are making sure that we're working closely with customers going into 2021 so that we can continue that momentum. And then on building electrification, I would say that's an area where we're really seeing a lot of growth. Just last week, some of the largest cities in California, Oakland and San Jose, announced codes that make it difficult or no longer can include gas in new construction. There's more than 40 communities now that have passed similar building codes. So we're continuing to see a lot of excitement around the opportunity to improve indoor air quality, lower overall operating costs for homes and businesses, and move forward to an electric building future as well. And then the last thing I thought I'd mention is how some of our customer engagement has needed to change during everything that we are experiencing with COVID and safer at home orders and everything else. And I'm really proud of how we have found new ways to work with our customers through all of this. We've been doing virtual site designs, virtual inspections. We're of course following all the social distancing and safety protocols when we're doing construction. But we've been able to move forward with projects despite some of those challenges. And kind of thinking of how everything that we're experiencing outside the energy industry right now, how that applies to our conversation today, I think that it's really evidence more than ever that the time for us to act on climate change is now. And when we think about how fast science and industry and government mobilized in order for us to be able to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, think about how quickly we've come to a point where we're distributing vaccines. We need to really take that focused and accelerated action and apply it to the work that we all do all day in climate change. So I know it's a challenging time, but I think for a lot of reasons, I think that there's reason for more optimism than ever.
Great. Well, a lot going on there in California. I'll get back to you. I want to ask you a little bit later about the heat waves and the importance of demand flexibility. But let me just also ask Alice about how she is dealing and her team there at Xcel in Colorado with the pandemic and the engagement with customers there, Alice. Alice, are you muted? Yeah.
There we go. Inevitably, it happens one time, right?
That's the line of the year. Can you please unmute? Right. Go ahead.
Yes. No, absolutely. I think you can hear me now.
Yeah.
So no, I naturally put it on mute because I still have 3 children sitting here at home doing their own videoing, and you can see my dog laying in the background. She occasionally gets a FedEx guy coming by that she wants to talk to. So, but no, I think Jill did a great job of describing how we've all had to flex in these times in order to meet our customers' needs and continue to deliver our services in the best way that we possibly can. And for us, it has been continued conversations with our customers around what we have with a number of our communities are called Energy Future Collaborations. And this is where we go into our communities and we sit down with them and talk to them specifically about what their needs are. So are they focused on electrifying their busing system? Are they focused on wanting to add more rooftop solar to their systems? Are they looking at how do they consolidate some of their office spaces in their buildings and really pursue deep energy efficiency activities? So we really try and meet our customers where they are. We've been doing these for now a couple of years, and the in-person meetings, of course, are always the best, right? You can see people, you can brainstorm around the table. We've had to flex and figure out how to do this in the new environment. How do you continue to have that good connection with those communities? Because it's not time to stop. We can't sit back and wait. We have to continue to press forward on what it is that we're trying to achieve, because the long-term solution is not something that's going to wait until we get there. We have to continue working on it today. And I think the same thing, Gil, can be said about the technologies that we need in order to reach that zero carbon futures. We have to continue focusing on those. So it's not just about the customers and the communities. It's about continuing work with the laboratories and the various agencies on showing what it is, identifying it, and making sure that they have the runway that's necessary to be able to provide solutions. Because a decade ago, when we were buying wind and solar, we were paying a lot higher prices. I know here in Colorado, some of our first wind farms were around 6.9 cents per kilowatt hour. The ones we received 2 years ago and that went into service this year averaged 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And that didn't just happen because nobody was buying them and we weren't investing in the technology. We've had to do that over time. And so I think, the things that we've been doing with our customers, we also have to continue doing with our other industry partners to make sure that they continue working on these different initiatives and activities, because climate change isn't going to wait for us. We have to continuously figure out how do we close the gap and what are the steps we need to take, and keep partnering on making sure that we're pushing that forward.
Yeah, and I know Alice Xcel is also partnering with state and local governments in selectively accelerating clean energy investments, grid investments, not just to address the transition to a cleaner grid, but to serve as a stimulus for economic recovery during this, as we try and get out of this pandemic recession, right?
That is exactly correct. And in Minnesota, we have a very specific filing. We were actually asked by our regulator in the state of Minnesota to bring forward a solution that would allow us to, show how do we partner on the economic recovery, whether it's in transmission or it's in generation. And we're happy that that filing went in. Here in Colorado, it's a little different. We weren't asked to put a comprehensive filing together, but there are many different initiatives underway. Including transportation electrification, which I know we're going to get into a little bit. And, Jill, I admire the programs y'all have in California. Y'all have done a great job of finding pathways to really help incentivize adoption. But we have an aggressive plan, I think, here at Xcel, is that we want to incentivize 1.5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030 across all of our 8 states. Now, a lot of that is driven in Colorado because of our governor's focus and the administration's focus on transportation electrification, as well as the integral piece that it plays in hitting the statewide targets that have been set in Colorado. We have legislatively put in place a goal to reach a 50% carbon reduction across all industry in the state of Colorado by 2030 and a 90% reduction by 2050. And so that's really, a big piece of the puzzle is looking at, and how do you collaborate on the various areas, not just the electric sector, but the transportation sector and others as well.
Great. Well, a lot going on there, Alice, and thank you to your leadership and creative energy there in Colorado. Jill, I mentioned before, it's probably a window to the art of the possible when it comes to demand flexibility. When you and other utilities in California experience heat wave, demand response, demand flexibility really played a great role in holding up the grid. In fact, I saw some of your tweets showing those charts about how significant they were, and I was really surprised. And I think it provides a window of what's possible and what the grid ought to be in the future, integrating demand flexibility and demand response as part of just normal operation. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, and what I'll talk about for August and September, where we had the first supply crisis in the state in nearly 20 years. And that was really just a fraction of our customers who are participating in demand response programs now. So I think it's, as you said, a window, but it just demonstrates there's significant potential here if we really are able to scale the flexibility on the customer side. So for people who might not have been following it as closely, back in August, it was August 14th, in fact, we ran into an issue where the California Independent System Operator, who manages the grid, got to a point where demand was outstripping the available supply, and that included imports and bringing online all the generation that was connected to the grid, everything that was possible. And so the only way to continue to balance the system was that the system operator had to call for rotating outages. And so all the utilities that participate in the market had to shed a portion of firm load, which is, just goes against and everything that a utility is working on every day to keep the lights on and provide service continuity. And we had to do it both on August 14th and August 15th. In our service area, over 100,000 customers experienced an outage for, about an hour. And this really put a spotlight on the grid and the transition to a carbon-free future. There were sideline experts who were claiming that maybe renewables were to cause, which was not the case and was not the conclusion of the system operator. But I think what that demonstrated is that by working together with customers for both those 2 days where the supply was shorter than demand, but then also the multiple days following that event where the heat persisted, we continued to have supply shortages, we were able to avoid additional rotating outages because our customers showed up through extreme conservation. We saw a combination of conservation, both compensated, where we pay customers to reduce their energy use, residential customers, small business, large businesses. We had businesses shut down operations for several hours or send people onto different shifts so that we could avoid that peak at the worst time of the day. But then also a lot of uncompensated conservation where customers just responded to the pleas that we put out and the other utilities put out on media, through online. We put signs on the highways and other ways that we reached customers to get people to conserve. And just in SCE's service area, we saw more than 1,000 megawatts come off the grid during the peak time that we would attribute to those customer conservation. That's significant. It's larger than most power plants. And we know that a clean energy future is going to require a lot more demand flexibility because we don't have the callable asset that a gas plant provides. And we know that there are intermittent resources along with the continued build out of storage, that in this transition, we are going to need more flexibility on the demand side. And what's really important, to me and to us at SCE as we're building out that additional flexibility is that we need to do it in a way where we're not requiring a significant sacrifice from any individual customer or individual business. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, only a fraction, less than 10% of our customers are in these demand response programs where they're making that trade-off. They're deciding, I would rather have a lower rate all year in exchange for participating in these events. But if we enrolled 50% or more of our customers in these programs, then we'd be able to moderate the amount of demand on the system in a way that is almost imperceptible to the customer. They wouldn't have to experience, a hotter internal temperature because their air conditioner is not running, for example. And we're focusing on that, not just for the next 10 or 15 years, but for next summer, because we know that we're going to continue to need to exercise more flexibility in the system. And so we're expanding our demand response portfolio going into 2021. And as we do think longer term, we're thinking about demand response, not in each specific technology, but trying to get to a point where we're technology neutral and you really just have a rate or a pricing structure where you can pay customers. And then what happens behind the meter is something that happens automatically, whether it's storage or they, cycle their appliances, thermostats, or elsewhere. So I think, it's something that Alice mentioned, the technology is available now for us to accomplish this carbon-free grid. So, and looks
Great.
like Paula,
well, it was a great thing to watch from afar. I know it wasn't easy, of course, dealing with the situation and with sometimes frustrations from customers. But it's again, I think it's a good window of what is possible in the future, done more as you've described in a more seamless way from a customer experience perspective. Now. Thank you, Paula. I think we're able to resolve the technical issues, and great for you to be with us. What I want for you to share with us is the view from a community-owned or municipally owned utility, because it's a little bit of a unique perspective. And I know, as you lead the utility there in San Antonio, you talk about not only people first, but a flexible path. I know you have a recent RFP, just a very innovative RFP that you have out right now. And so you can talk a little bit about that, and we'll ask a couple more questions.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, and see you.
Well, awesome. You know, here we are in the virtual world, and Murphy's Law happens, but here we are, and we are being resilient. So thank you all for your patience today, and thanks for my fellow panelists for making it move forward. And Gil, thanks again for facilitating and inviting me to this. I always say I love to be your wing woman in the municipal arena. We both hail from that part of the industry. So for San Antonio, we provide electric and natural gas services to all of San Antonio, which is currently the 7th largest city in the United States. And we contribute and provide all the power that San Antonio needs, but we also contribute to the Texas grid. Interestingly, we provide about 7% of the power. We have generation, transmission, and distribution, and then we serve customers, but we provide about 12 to 13% of the state's reserve margin. So it's pretty significant from the perspective that we have here. And we are the longest serving utility in Texas. We've been around for 160 years. To be municipal in the energy industry, I think it doesn't differentiate us technically. I think we all do very similar things in the industry. But I think what happens for us is that we are very, very connected. We're owned. The way we look at our service territory is we are owned by our customers through the city of San Antonio proper, but we basically treat our customers as our investors. And we refer to them often as customers. We never refer to them as ratepayers. We think about them as our neighbors, families, and friends. I personally am from San Antonio, born and raised here. So it means a whole lot for us to be able to think about moving the industry forward, moving the company forward, and doing that for the benefit of San Antonio. Gil, you're exactly right. We have been thinking about this evolution for a very long time. We have actually been in the wind business for 20 years. Of the 7,000 megawatts we have, over 1,000 comes from wind. We did a big RFP back in the 2011 timeframe for utility scale solar. That was for about 400 megawatts at a time when the prices were very different, multiples of what you can find today. But we combined that effort with thinking about, again, our community, and we coupled it with our strategy called the New Energy Economy. And we wanted the solar industry to take root in San Antonio. So we thought about using our purchase power to help drive change in the industry. And we've been committed to that for years. And we continue to think about what can we do as we're making this evolution. So we've got wind and solar, and we have a huge energy efficiency and conservation program. And those have been very, very effective. We closed 2 older coal units. And so this what we call now this flexible path strategy that we have is our journey forward, because we have to do meaningful things, not just structured things. We can do structured deals all the time. We understand how the market works. But what we're really trying to do is make sure that we know the source of the electrons. And we ultimately believe that the source of changing molecules on the fossil fuel side is something that we have to be an active part in. So as Gil mentioned, we just issued a global RFP. And we started earlier in August with a global RFI. And what we're doing is we're inviting the globe to help us on our transformation. We have created a profile. Our profile is up to 900 megawatts of solar, more than we have today. We have about 600 of utility and rooftop, 600 megawatts, but we want about 900 megawatts of solar to add. We want, and that basically speaks to our pillar of environmental responsibility, that we're increasing our commitment there. We want battery storage, and we defined it small, fast response up to 50 megawatts, because we want our value pillar of resiliency to respond to helping solar. And then we have about up to 500 megawatts of firming capacity to help in our value pillar associated with reliability. We believe that we need to move to a bundled approach for energy solutions, because every technology, whether it's renewable or not, has some challenge with it. Intermittency, complications caused by weather patterns and time of day. You need to take every single technology that you have out there and bundle it together so you can offset the challenges that come with that technology. What we really love about the 500 megawatts, though, too, is it can be new technology, and we want to hear what's really happening out there across the globe. We think there's some exciting things happening in Texas, in the nation, and of course, across the globe. And so we want to put a real value proposition, a real RFP where we want people to compete and share with us their ideas. We believe this evolution happens through feeding technology. When we fed it back in 2011 and 2012, we realized that you can help shift the market by actually putting money, funding the resources by these new options. So we're super excited. We launched the RFP last week. We also launched it in 10 languages. We started that this year. We want to hear from everyone. We had about 200 responses in 30 days. We expect more in this one. We expect, again, people to want to come and help us solve this issue that we have in trying to move to decarbonization faster and trying to really incent other people who are developing technologies to keep making those improvements. So it's pretty exciting. Our mayor is very supportive, Mayor Ron Nirenberg, and he's helping us promote that. And we're sharing this information that we're getting with the public. So we have preliminary information from the RFI, and as we have more information about the new technologies in the RFP, we're going to share. We think it's all about partnership. We think it's all about being open and flexible and not being stuck in the way that you solve energy solutions in the future. And accordingly, we think we're going to continue to make progress along the way.
A lot to unpack there, Paula. But let me just have a follow-up question about how you're dealing with this COVID pandemic, in terms of your interaction with your customers and, of course, your employees. I know you posted a very heart-wrenching event in LinkedIn. So just tell us how you're dealing, you and your team are dealing with this COVID pandemic.
Well, I would tell you that, like everyone, I mean, I think everyone is having tremendous challenges. I mean, those of us all know someone who's been lost, and many of us have lost family members, and it's shaken us at the core, particularly in this industry where we've had our processes down quite to the nth degree, and we've had to rethink every single thing. We had to rethink how we communicate and how we connect, still not just through technology, but emotionally with people. COVID-19 in our minds is not just a health crisis, but it's an emotional crisis. I mean, it has put so much pressure on our customers and our employees in terms of trying to manage through it, trying to raise children and get them through the educational challenges, and really seeing the weaknesses of not being able to be in class, as well as these connections with parents. And all of those have happened, and we've experienced everything along the way. But we do have a people first philosophy, and our business trinity is we focus on our customers. All of us think that that's what we have to be totally attuned to, and the many wide voices and preferences that come with serving a community that's approaching 2 million people. But we have to keep listening. So it's our customers, it's our community that we serve, and then again, taking care of our employees and helping them continue to develop technically, and both their IQ and their EQ, their emotional intelligence. So it's tested us in every way. I do all kinds of things. I do videos, I do voice recordings, I do Bitmojis, I do anything I can to get their attention, and that cascades through the organization to make sure that it helps. Yes, Gil, you're right. I mean, we were probably unrealistically, we were feeling blessed because we had not had a fatality on our team. And then recently we lost our employee. And I did share that on LinkedIn, mostly because I would not share his information and his name, for his family's privacy. But I shared it because this is such a public crisis. And in our minds, losing one employee is just way too many. And so anything that we could do to keep people vigilant. We are an essential service. We are working in this industry that if we don't do the things that we need to do, and we're not conscientious about wearing PPE, I mean, I have my scarf on, I have my gloves. If we're not conscientious, then we fail. And we fail doing something that our community and our public believes is guaranteed. Hit the light switch, power comes on. So behind all that, again, we know that there are lives that have been affected, jobs lost, just a tremendous amount of devastation. So it was a gut punch for us to lose our employee. And I just talk about it because I want people to continually always take it seriously. These are some of the hardest holidays that we're ever going to go through. We're not going to experience them the way that we would love to, particularly now, as much as we miss each other. But we must stay vigilant. We must keep pushing. We must, at the same time, be multitaskers and take care of folks, but also drive this industry for the major changes that need to happen to help the environment. So it's a big task. I am honored to be in this industry with all of you. And to the listeners, and I just feel like I'm honored and privileged, and I have a mission that I have to do all of that. That's the job, as Angela Bassett says in the Mission Impossible movie. That's the job, and we need to feel blessed that we get to do it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Being the first epicenter of COVID, our local utility here, Con Edison, lost 8 of their team members to COVID and many other positive. And sometimes we forget that many of our employees are really first responders. We have to keep the lights on no matter what, 24/7, 365. And thank you for sharing that. Before we go to a lightning round question, I just want to ask Alice. I know, Alice, you mentioned about your wind going from 6 to 1.5 cents. And I think people may not know, but I think Xcel really is the leading company who has figured out and still figuring out how best to integrate wind into the system. And that's why I know you talked about transmission, not just for Xcel, not just for Colorado Xcel, but really for the greater good of the industry. But because I think about your expertise in integrating wind, can you just talk a little bit about that and how that came about?
No, absolutely. It has truly been a journey, Gil, to get to where we are today. So for those of you on the phone, just to give you some numbers to back things up, our system here in Colorado peaks about 7,000 megawatts. And today, installed on our system, we have over 4,000 megawatts of wind. So that's a pretty hefty number. Most of you also recognize that wind primarily blows at night. And that means that we're not at that 7,000 megawatts at night. So managing it on the system has become an integral part of our learnings over the past decade. And really where that came from, Gil, and this is the same thing that we're going to need for any type of variable energy resource that continues to come forward, is a focus on the forecasting. Partnering with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and the atmospheric research laboratories, we have been able to develop tools that have allowed us to integrate that wind on the system to know when it's going to be operating. But that's not enough. Jill did an excellent job talking about how we have to continue to focus on flexible resources. And that is a big part of the puzzle as well. Here in Colorado, we're blessed that some of our previous generations recognize the value in flexible resources, and we built roughly a 300 megawatt pumped hydro facility back in the late 1940s and early 1950s that has been essential for helping us integrate the wind resources on our system. Because as you can imagine, if you've traveled to Colorado, you know what the Rocky Mountains look like. As those cold fronts roll off of the Rocky Mountains and onto the eastern plains of Colorado, where those wind facilities are built, you have to be able to manage when those resources are going to turn on, when they're going to turn off, when they're going to ramp up, when they're going to ramp down. And you have to manage the rest of your system to make sure that you don't have flickering lights, you don't have voltage issues, everything along those lines. So we have had a lot of partnerships to figure it out. We've incrementally added, those resources through the years. And quite frankly, we think we can add more here in Colorado. And that will be part of the plan that we'll roll out next year, is looking at how do we continue to access those resources on the Eastern Plains. And I'm excited to say Colorado, not only Colorado, but Xcel Energy is on track to add over 1.5 gigawatts of wind resources to our system. With the Cheyenne Ridge facility that we added here that we own, plus the others in New Mexico and up in the Minnesota and South Dakota and North Dakota regions. There's a lot coming. But Gil, I think also focus on solar is going to be a big deal. We're going to take the lessons learned from those that have come before us and make sure that we're integrating those carefully. But we continue to need additional innovation on zero carbon dispatchable resources. And that really is going to be the focus between 2030 and 2050 to close the gap. I can't tell you exactly what the solution is going to be, but there are a lot of players in the game right now looking at what are the possibilities. And that's what we're truly excited about exploring and continuing to press on, is to close that last 20% gap with those technological advancements that are still necessary.
Great. And talking about those who came before us, let me go to Gil in terms of solar, and maybe a two-part question. There's one question from the audience about, the question goes, how much of the California summer overload was the effect of the duck curve of daily solar generation? And then if I can add to that, as Alice talked about integration of wind, maybe you can talk a little bit about integration of solar, since you guys are so way ahead on that front.
Sure.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, I saw that question, and am I?
Yeah, you're good.
Am I good? So I saw the question in the chat about the duck curve. So for people who might not be familiar, it's what we call the net demand curve. So when you subtract out the solar that's being provided to serve load, you'll see that as the sun sets, the load that the grid has to provide that's not solar goes up quite dramatically. And year over year, as solar and other renewables, but particularly solar deploy, that ramp, we call it, the steepness of the curve goes up and putting more strain on the grid. And so the events that we talked about earlier in the heat waves, all of the times of day where the grid became short of supply was all happening at the point where the sun was starting to set and moving into when solar was no longer available to serve load. That doesn't mean that solar was the cause of the crisis, because of all of the renewables, solar is actually quite easy to predict. Pretty much to the minute when the sun is going to set every day. So instead, we've found that there are other changes that we need to do in the market, how we account for solar and other resources that were recommended by the California system operator. But absolutely, the crisis and the shortage in California was happening as the sun was setting. The other thing I think I'll mention to your question, Gil, is we're talking about integrating solar, and we've been doing that at a large scale in California for a number of years. But where we're continuing to see a lot of growth is behind the meter. So we have over 350,000 customers now who have solar on their rooftop, and a growing part of that resource and the customer deployments are people who are pairing solar and storage. So we now have over 10,000 customers that have storage at their homes or in their businesses. And that we're seeing storage growing at a much faster rate now than solar. We continue to connect between 3,000 and 4,000 new solar customers every month at Southern California Edison, but the storage numbers we expect we're going to continue to see growing. And we've actually put quite a number of incentives in place through California policies and SCE programs to try to help reduce the cost of storage. and makes solar and storage available to customers at all income levels. So that's a really important part of the clean energy transition, is not just that we're getting the clean gigawatt hours out there, but that we are making sure that all customers have access to these clean technologies. And one example of that I'll mention is we've recently went to operational with a microgrid and in the San Jacinto community here in Southern California. That's a case where at a high school, they have solar and storage installed already. We partnered with them, with Tesla, with also the American Red Cross, and we made that solar and storage able to be completely islandable from the grid. So in the event of a grid outage, or if there are any other kind of crisis in the community where the high school can become, a shelter or a center of refuge working with the American Red Cross, and they will have access to, the facilities at the gymnasium in the high school. You can charge your cell phones. The Red Cross can set up a shelter if it's necessary, and all of that enabled with a completely clean microgrid at the customer site. So I know we often are talking about microgrids, and there are some examples where I think you can really stack all the different values together and you end up with something that makes a lot of sense. It's valuable for the utility, it's valuable for the customer, and most importantly, it's valuable to the community in that area. So I think we're going to see more unique kinds of deployments like that as we're continuing to see renewable deployments.
Great, thank you. So before we end this panel, I would be remiss not asking you to kind of share with us what's in the pipeline. You really have not announced it. What are you working on? What should people expect? The next thing that you're going to roll out that's going to be cool and exciting and in your jurisdiction. So Paula, let me start with you.
Well, very good. I appreciate the question. We think it's all about, there's no silver bullet. You can't just do one thing. You do have to keep incenting technology so that the prices continue to come down, because you can take them to scale over and over again, and that the effectiveness of that technology keeps improving. We are going to relaunch another flexible program. It's called Flex Step. And the ability for us to, again, use energy efficiency and conservation as a major tool that is kind of the undercurrent of controlling the demand for usage, as well as making sure that people are translating that to change behavior. That we think is the most important thing that we can do. So we have had a wonderful program that has worked very well, and we appreciate the Alliance to Save Energy, which, Gil, you've been a board member and a chair of that for many years. We were able to receive an award for that program in 2019, and we had it for about, about 10 years. And we saved over 800 megawatts, and we would have built another plant if we had not done that. So it's really important that we continue to change the generation side of the business, but also how customers use energy. So what we're going to do is use this magic recipe and go after a global RFP in that spectrum. So we want to hear what's the latest that is out there in terms of new types of products and services that we can share. And as discussed by Jill earlier, making sure that we have something at every demographic, every level of income is really important. We are doing the same thing. We're doing it through our solar program, which part of it, the rebates come through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program. We have rooftop available where a customer doesn't have to buy the system. We make sure that the developer puts the system on, and then the customer gets credits. And some of the most meaningful testimony have been about customers who would ordinarily not been able to get into solar and have those systems happen. But we're doing that, more community solar, and we want to know what else can we do in that realm of weatherization, or what's the latest, what's beyond that is what we're searching for. So we will see that. And the last piece I'll say is we're working with an organization called Epicenter. Epicenter is an organization that we created that was going to be more of a think tank centralization in San Antonio. we wanted to do convening. When physical convening was the thing, we think going forward, there will be both this physical and virtual. But last year we decided, don't worry about the brick and mortar, worry about the content of what we're trying to do. So we're coupling the work that they do. They go out and help us get people to come in and basically do Shark Tank with us, to tell us what's the latest and greatest, everything from ideology and concept to things that are in prototype, things that we can take to scale. And we want to help developers of innovation get where they need to be. And we actually want San Antonio to be the pilot capital of the world in terms of new technology. So you'll hear us talk a whole lot more because, again, we think that decarbonization will be addressed through the effective use of technology. And then as we all strive to get to smart communities and smart cities again and again and again, trying to bring those new ideas and thoughts forward, that we think is the most important thing for us to do as we're serving and multitasking along the way. So more to come on all of that.
Great. Jill, in lightning round in 2 minutes, what's next? What's secret that you can at least give us a hint? Not fully reveal, but give us a hint. What's next in your SCE pipeline?
Well, in 2021, it's about taking what's already a really large electric vehicle program as one example and increasing it nearly tenfold. So we're going to deploy now, going from a couple of thousand chargers that we've deployed over the last few years to now deploying 4,000 to 5,000 chargers every single year for the next couple of years as we build that foundation to enable clean transportation. And then the piece that maybe isn't out in the public yet that I can share is we are taking the next step and looking at what we're calling reimagining the grid. And we'll be releasing more details on that really shortly, where we're really talking about the fundamental grid design needs to change and also needs to be something that maybe isn't the same uniformly across our system, but we've got design criteria and objectives in corridors where you have a lot of electric vehicles, in a different type of approach in a residential neighborhood where you have a lot of solar. And so we're starting to take that next generation of electric system design and putting pen to paper and details and putting it out there. So you'll be seeing more about that shortly. Excellent.
Well, I'm sorry, I think we lost Alice, but maybe that's going to be our surprise. We won't know what's next in the pipeline, but I'm sure it's exciting. So just before we end this panel, I just want to tell you all listening to this that we have been privileged to have what I would say are the three most creative leaders in our industry. So you better watch out for these three. They are going to be kicking some butt and really making the necessary changes and the innovation and just the things that are going to be needed in our industry. And I can't be more proud to know them, to be working with them, to be my peers in this industry. I learn a lot. I call them a lot and pick their brains so that we can get some good ideas here in New York. So with that, the GridWise Alliance, just watch. We are going to have a big initiative asking for $50 billion in stimulus to invest in our grid as the new administration and the new Congress works this first quarter. More to come on that. But these are the three leaders who are making it happen. These are the three leaders who will make things happen as we go forward. So thank you again, Jill. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Alice, for sharing your ideas and your time today. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for an amazing panel. Thank you, Gil. This is really what gridCONNEXT is all about. We're going to transition now to our next session, but really hearing from all of you was just inspiring and on-the-ground information and, really relatable. So thank you for everything you're doing out there in the field.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.